of the Communist Party of Great Britain, and the seminar is also sponsored by Labour Party Marxists. So I'll just hand it over to Jack to give the political report, and afterwards we will have discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Well, I think it's obvious what you have to begin with, and that's clearly the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. The Israelis announced that, quote unquote, he's no longer able to terrorize the world. Well, quite frankly, looking at the state of Israel, I would actually say, of course, that Israel is a terrorist state. It might not be terrorizing the world, but it certainly terrorizes the Middle East, and it certainly terrorizes its internal Palestinian population, not least those on the West Bank, but of course you can't forget Gaza either. But of course, you know, Israel precisely also poses a threat to the wider world because they seem to be acting in a way designed to provoke Iran, or maybe they'll just keep blaming Iran for Palestinian resistance, for Hezbollah, for anything that they don't like. And of course, we cannot forget that Israel is a nuclear state, but of course it isn't signed up to you know, the international agreements on the question. It sort of denies it's got nuclear weapons, but it's an open secret. But anyway, the main point is that yes, they've assassinated a particular leader, and they seem to be embarking on a policy of also assassinating, taking out likely successors. It really does reveal a certain sort of mindset. I don't know, but maybe they've watched too many James Bond, you know, movies, too many Westerns. You know, the idea that their enemies consist of a Mr. Evil, you know, some individual who alone is responsible for everything that they don't like. It doesn't seem to occur to them that what they've got in the form of the Palestinians, what you've got in the form of Hezbollah in Lebanon are resistance movements, and they're not going to stop resisting because this, that, or many leaders are taken out. And indeed, you know, the tendency would be that you start taking out leader after leader, and what sort of gets selected in a sort of Darwinian fashion is far from someone who's going to be passive and nice and conciliatory towards Israel, not someone coming with an olive branch, but precisely someone coming with the bullet and the bomb. That's surely the result of this sort of obsession that Israel has. America has it as well, you know, with the Taliban and its foreign policy. Okay, so it wouldn't surprise me that for every Hezbollah leader that they take out, there are 100, 1,000 volunteers wanting to join Hezbollah at this very moment. Okay, so I looked at you know, the sort of TV video film footage of this Israeli strike in Beirut, and you know, read some description of it, and I have to admit that I was shocked because my initial assumption was that, hey, this would be a cruise missile or a ballistic missile strike, but no, this was aimed at not only a building but what existed underneath the building. So they created a crater that was 36 foot deep. And I thought to myself instantly, good for, for God's sake, that is some big bomb. And so I looked up, what was the bomb that Israel used, and maybe it was more than one. I'm not sure. Anyway, it turns out, at least in terms of the reports that I've read, to be a Mark 84 heavy bomb. This is only a 2,000-pound bomb. This is the sort of bombs that America has been supplying Israel throughout the Gaza war. So if you think about hospitals, you think about schools, you think about anywhere that Israel claims that Hamas has a command post, these are the bombs that Israel is using. And of course, what got me thinking about this was precisely because I thought to myself, has Israel got bunker busters? And what I mean by that isn't these 2,000-pound bombs, but the sort of bunker busters that you would need to attack and put out of operation Iran's nuclear facilities that are buried not only underground, but under steel and under layers of concrete, and they don't. So although this particular Hezbollah headquarters was underground, and although it was protected apparently by steel and concrete, Israel would need more powerful bombs. But the point still is there that these bombs are in everyday use in Gaza, and who is supplying them? Who is enabling Israel? For all of Blinken's urging a restraint, well, they're supplying the weapons that Israel is using at this very moment in order to up the ante, to take out the leader of Hezbollah in order to provoke what? Surrender? Do they really think that that would provoke surrender? Surely not, no, but to provoke Hezbollah into an action that Israel then uses as an excuse to launch what we all expect to be sometime soon a ground invasion. So if we look at Iran, should be noted, and I think almost every journalist that I've read on this question is noting how restrained Iran has been. We've had assassinations in Tehran, we've had Israeli strikes against its embassy in Damascus, and the reality has been, of course, that Iran has held back. Yeah, we had the sort of token. We all knew it. It was announced in advance, drone and missile attack on Israel. And I think some poor Bedouin boy was killed. Nonetheless, it's Israel that's going around the Middle East trying to provoke reaction from Iran, reaction from Hezbollah, reaction from the Houthis. And of course, if we look at the supposed cause of all this, October the 7th last year, the idea that we're all meant to blame Hamas for what was, after all, a giant prison breakout. And, a Marxist analysis always says we've got to go back in history. You don't simply look at, the last incident and say, well, they started it. The reality is that, if you wanted to understand what's going on today, well, you could go back, to 1917, the Balfour Declaration, the independence of Israel, the Six-Day War, the conquest of Gaza, the conquest of the West Bank. All of that is something that you would put in. And of course, we would add to that, whatever the date one wants to choose. Various dates have been given: 67, 1970, 73. But the United States replaced France, who replaced Britain as Israel's, imperial sponsor. Israel is a powerful country in the Middle East. Of course, we all know that, but it's a powerful country because it's backed by major powers. First of all, British Empire, after 1948, France, after 67, 1970, whatever date one chooses, the United States. So precisely, it's the United States that's enabled its war on Gaza, enabled its provocation against Lebanon, against Hezbollah over recent weeks. And of course, from Netanyahu's point of view, this wasn't just an act, designed to provoke Hezbollah. Surely it was an act to humiliate Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I can't read it in any other way. There you are at the United Nations. You have Blinken, you have Joe Biden, you have David Lammy, you have the government in France, etc., all urging Israel to come to some sort of ceasefire arrangement. 21 days was mentioned, and Netanyahu spoke at the UN and spoke about total victory. And of course, he knew when he was speaking that the leader of Hezbollah was just about to be taken out. And he called, of course, the UN, didn't he? Because most countries around the world look aghast at what Israel is doing, and of course accuses basically the entire world of being anti-Semitic. In other words, anyone, and this is the point we've been making for years now, anyone who dares to criticize Israel is automatically accused of anti-Semitism. And we've seen it used in Britain against the left in the Labour Party. If you look at Germany, it's been used to tame Die Linke and the rest of the left in Germany. One country after the other, the establishment, but urged on, of course, by Israel, and the alliance that they have with Israel is using this as their most effective propaganda weapon. But of course, it's a lie. It's a big lie. The fact of the matter is, if we look at America, a good portion, especially of young Jews, are completely opposed to what Israel is doing. If we look at the great demonstrations in London, what is noticeable about them is, the number of Muslims, the number of radicals on it, but also the number of Jewish people organized, for example, in the Jewish bloc, but also contingents of ultra-Orthodox Jews, but also contingents of sons and daughters. And the last demonstration I saw, a granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. And basically their message is that you're not doing it in our name. Israel claims to be the state of all Jews throughout the world. But a good proportion of Jews militantly reject that lie, militantly put themselves against Zionism and the logic of Zionism that leads to perpetual war, that leads to ethnic cleansing, and of course with that the distinct danger that if they can't actually dump people in Egypt, if they can't actually force people over the River Jordan from the West Bank, genocide. And we've had generals, we've had politicians in Israel advocate starvation, advocate the denial of water, something, of course, Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, and now the British Prime Minister, was doing in October last year. Okay. So we have the Chief of Staff in Israel talking about mobilizing reserve brigades to prepare to enter Lebanon. And indeed, before this talk, I was looking at Israel, Lebanon on Google News and all the rest of it. And there are rumors that those operations have already begun. There are also reports, of course, I don't know if you read them, of the rumors being denied. This is a low-level incursion. I suspect they are just rumors. Nonetheless, the general message we get, it's not going to be a question of if Israeli ground troops go in, it's more a question of when. And I think that what we should expect is before they go in, we should expect a greatly intensified aerial and artillery and missile bombardment of southern Lebanon. If you think that Israel is carpet bombing southern Lebanon at the moment, no, it's not, but it will be. And that's the point. It will go in on the basis, as it did in Gaza, of flattening whole areas and then sending its tanks in, then sending its sappers, its bulldozers in. So I don't think myself that these rumors are reliable, but it shows you how psyched up everyone in Israel and of course in Lebanon is. Okay, we all know that Israel has done it before. I'm not sure, I mean, I've looked it up, what counts as a previous Lebanon war. It did intervene in what was, this is sort of from my memory, the Lebanese civil war. I remember Israeli troops in Beirut. I remember Israeli troops holding back while refugees, Palestinian refugees, were massacred, letting Christian militias loose to kill and kill and kill. But we also remember that Israel was forced to withdraw. And that's happened twice. So the last time Israel went in and then came out, I think was 2006. And that was a short war where, according to the pundits, Hezbollah, which was viewed widely and still is viewed widely in Lebanon, not simply as a Shia militia and Shia political party, but as a national resistance movement. The pundits talk about Hezbollah and Israel tying, that neither side could overcome the other. But the reality of it was that for a militia group without an air force, without, a navy, to have stopped Israel, of course, was a victory for Hezbollah, was a victory for the majority of the Lebanese population, and a humiliation for Israel, which had prior to that basically regarded itself as invincible. Israel has fought a whole number of wars, sometimes simultaneously, against its Arab neighbors. And while, for example, in 73, it was caught unawares, Yom Kippur, the reality is the Israeli might overcame Egypt, overcame Jordan, overcame Syria, but it couldn't overcome Hezbollah. So what exactly, they're going to do in terms of their tactics, what exactly their war aims are, I'm somewhat mystified by. They talk about, for example, stopping Hezbollah rockets. Well, I'm sorry, maybe, I haven't looked it up, but if you take, for example, a Katyusha rocket, these are old Soviet style rockets. I don't know what their range is. I'm just going to make it up, so some bright spark can tell me I'm talking shite. But if I said 5 miles, maybe I'd be right. Okay, so if you take out Hezbollah, 20 miles into southern Lebanon. They can't fire Katyushkas at Israel proper. But the reality is, what you do is what Hezbollah has done, and that is equip yourself with longer range missiles. Why not have a missile that has got a 100-mile range, or 150-mile range, or a 200-mile range? The reality is that resistance will continue. And so, as I said, exactly what Israel's aims are, I'm somewhat mystified. The sensible thing would be, I'm not saying I'm giving advice to Israel, but the sensible thing is to recognize that what you have is a political problem and to overcome it using political means. The idea that you can knock out, which is Netanyahu claims, Hamas, it's a nonsense. In the same way, the idea that you can stop, Hezbollah firing rockets is a nonsense. And therefore you have to look behind the rhetoric, because Netanyahu, his government, his ministers, his army, his generals aren't stupid. They know it exactly as I do. So you need to actually work out what are Israel's real aims in this war. And as far as I can see, the aim would be, with the Palestinians, it's ethnic cleansing. And when it comes to Lebanon, it's to wreck the place. It's to make it inoperable as any sort of society. And to all intents and purposes, it's sort of like that at present. So if we look at Syria, if we look at Lebanon, they have all the characteristics of a failed state. It seems to me that what Israel will be aiming for is to participate in and to back forces that want another civil war in Lebanon, that the majority of people in Lebanon, of course, don't want. I don't know, but it has to be something along those lines. And maybe also what its aims are, although Netanyahu hasn't openly stated it, is to provoke war with Iran, to attack those nuclear facilities. And as I've said before, to do that, will need the United States to enable it, because to my knowledge, at least, they don't have things like the MOB, something like that, the mother of all bombs, which is really heavy stuff that, from my knowledge, has to be delivered from a transport aircraft. So heavy is it. You're not going to do it with a F-35 or F-16. You'd need something really heavy and then launch it out the back of your cargo aircraft, and you'd guide it down to its target, using satellite guidance and all the rest of it. Anyway, that strikes me as, to use Trump's term and to use the words of Netanyahu, finish the job. That's what finishing the job strikes me as. The idea that on the wreckage that causes there would be peace is just inconceivable. No, it would actually deepen the crisis. It would spread the mayhem and chaos. Okay. Okay, I think I've covered that. Just to add a footnote to that, we're just on the cusp of the first anniversary of the war on Gaza, and I'm going to preempt you. We've got Moshe Machover speaking next Sunday at 5 o'clock on the subject. All I wanted to say is, of course, that in terms of Hamas's strategic aim in its prison breakout, I think was one, derailing the so-called Abraham Accords. It seems to have been successful at that. Saudi Arabia, in spite of wanting to normalize relations with Israel, just finds it impossible politically to do any such thing. But also, Hamas surely had the aim, seeing no other way to win, to involve wider forces. And if we look at what's going on in Lebanon, however terrible it is, and it is terrible, that seems to me to be something that Hamas, as well as the Israeli war cabinet, has been aiming for. But of course, from Hamas's point of view, they'll also be aiming to involve Egypt. They'll also be aiming to involve Jordan, not, of course, with the governments of Sisi, not with the governments of the Hashemite monarchy in Jordan, but precisely with their co-thinkers in Egypt and Jordan, who are organized into a powerful political party, an international indeed, i.e. the Muslim Brotherhood. And it's quite conceivable, in conditions that I've already described of an Israeli attack on Iran, the spreading of chaos throughout the Middle East, to imagine the Sisi government falling, to imagine the Hashemite kingdom in Jordan falling. That isn't a positive program from our point of view at all. We're not talking about the forces of the working class. We're talking about reactionary forces. So it seems to me that what is the immediate prospect in the Middle East is barbarism. That's what Netanyahu seems determined to bring. And in desperation, that seems to be what Hamas has fought for as well. That isn't, I hasten to add, to draw some sort of symmetry between Hamas and the IDF and the Israeli government. The fact of the matter is that Hamas, yes, is a reactionary organization, but it's acting as a resistance force to Israeli occupation or Israeli imprisonment of the Gaza population in that particular respect. Okay, moving on. Just a very quick comment on the Labour Party conference. Yeah, we had speeches about the light being at the end of the tunnel. We had the celebration. I had to switch the radio off when people were cheering Keir Starmer to the rafters and all the rest of it. But of course, the Labour Party conference, I think, is notable for two things. And that's, first of all, the defeat that the leadership, who weren't there, they'd already gone back to London. They arranged it deliberately. The Conference Arrangements Committee scheduled the debate on the winter fuel allowance to the last day of the conference. Keir wasn't there, Rachel Reeves wasn't there, etc., etc. But they lost, and they must have known that they were going to lose. They would have, added up the numbers, and yeah, with the trade union vote, not least with the Unites vote, they would have known that they were heading for a defeat. But I remember way back when I was a kid and used to watch the Labour Party conference on, main time TV. I remember Howard Wilson going, and he was defeated in conference after conference, in conference vote after conference vote, just turning round after suffering another humiliation, saying, look, I don't care, I don't give a damn what you vote for. I'm the Prime Minister, we're the government, and we'll do what we want. And that's exactly what Keir Starmer would have said if he'd got up on his hind legs after that particular vote. It was purely symbolic. The Labour Party exercises no discipline over its MPs, let alone disciplines its government. The Labour Party in Parliament is autonomous, and the government is the Queen's government and now the King's government, not the Labour Party's government. The other issue, of course, that dominated the Labour Party conference, much surely to the fury of Keir Starmer and the apparatchiks, was Trousergate. Sorry for using the term, but the clothes, the tickets to the concerts, the £20,000 worth of free rent for his son to study in peace during the general election campaign, so he wasn't bothered by the press outside Keir Starmer's door. £20,000. I think we could offer something rather on the cheaper side. But the real question here isn't that the Labour Party is so uniquely corrupt compared with the Tories. No, it's just that what you get with these professional politicians is they view these things as something that comes with the job. That not only do they get an MP's salary, not only do they get a minister's salary, not only do they get a prime minister's salary, and the expectation when they eventually leave office being showered with very lucrative offers of, we want you to advise us, we want you on the board, we want you to act as a UN this or a UN that, and all that sort of carry on. But they don't think that they can dress properly or house themselves properly unless they actually take individual donations. So we're not talking about donations to the Labour Party, that the Labour Party NEC, which is a semi-democratic or body in the Labour Party, decides what to do with that money. No, it's up to the individuals. And I'm reminded of the old, the old socialist movement, the old communist movement, that not only even in the Italian Communist Party of Enrico Berlinguer, the Euro Communist Party, which had loads of MPs in the Rome Parliament, they used to enforce a party max on their MPs. This is something they inherited, from the Paris Commune, something they inherited from the Bolsheviks. But they would take the majority of MPs' pay and put it in the coffers of the party. And MPs were expected to live on a skilled worker's wage, not on hundreds of thousands of pounds, but on tens of thousands of pounds. That's what it would be in Britain today. So I haven't got my pocket calculator out. Either way, the MPs would compare. We can't possibly live on that. Angela Rayner, I can't possibly dress myself in that. I couldn't afford to go to New York to some penthouse for my New Year's celebration. Well, that's true, Angela. That's true, Keir. You have to learn, surely, to live like those you're meant to be representing, the labouring classes. And they can't afford luxury, designer clothes every week. They can't afford to pop off to New York to a luxury apartment to celebrate the new year. At the moment, precisely as with this vote on winter fuel payments, it is a choice. I mean, look at me. I'm an old age pensioner, say, believe it or not. I cannot afford to heat this house. I'm got a choice. What do I do with my money? And at the moment, I'm choosing not to heat the house. That is a choice that real people face if they're over, what is it now, 66 in Britain because of you. So yeah, we then have, don't we, the news now that Rosie Duffield has resigned from the Labour Party. Now, she's no rebel. Well, she might be over the trans question, and she certainly was no friend of Jeremy Corbyn, but she's saying, I think quite rightly, she's the MP for Canterbury, that her constituents are bombarding her with emails, bombarding her with phone calls, waylaying her on the street at her constituency, surgery, etc., etc. What the hell is this Labour government doing? Attacking old people while living the life of the bourgeoisie. what is this all about? What sort of government have we got? What is the government in it for their own self-advancement or for the general betterment? Well, you pose the question and you already got the answer. This isn't about serving the working class. This is about looking after number one. And that's what these right-wing Labour politicians have been in it from go-get. If you think about Tony Blair and his account of being at university with Cherry, and they weigh up who's going to be the most successful lawyer, or who should go into politics, what party should I join? Oh, I'll join the Labour Party because they're out of office. You've got more chance of rising up the greasy ladder in an opposition party than you have in a government party. I mean, that sort of cynicism, I think, sums up the Labour right. But I do think we should also make the point about the Sharon Grahams of the world, of the Jeremy Corbyns of the world. Are these the representatives of the working class? Well, they certainly claim to be. But the reality is that certainly if you take, the classic Marxist view of trade union politics, of the sort that Sharon Graham, I think personifies to a T, this is the bourgeois politics of the working class. Sharon Graham. Keir Starmer is just a bourgeois politician. He's no different from Rishi Sunak or David Cameron. They are just bourgeois politicians. It's Sharon Graham that's trading in the labour market, the commodity labour power with the capitalist class. And sometimes the capitalist class is, as in the National Health Service, in local government, national government, is the government. But it's the same point that her politics are about improving, sure, the condition of the personification of wage labour, i.e. the working class. They want to improve the condition of the working class, but they rely on the working class remaining a slave class. And that's the point. They rely on being an intermediary between capital and labour. And it's the politics of Marxism that actually represent the independent class politics of the working class, which are not sectional, are not trade unionist, are not national, but have to be international. The working class is international. And Marxism stresses the interests of the working class as a whole, not the British working class, not people in Unite, not people in the GMB, who are busily constructing weapons of terror, such as the Trident, renewal. That's not independent working class politics. That's sectional working class politics. And Marxism strives to lift the working class from sectionalism precisely to universalism, to think of ourselves precisely as a future ruling class, and that requires the liberation of all workers, no matter what country they live in, no matter what their nationality. Okay. Just turning to Ukraine, because we've not only had the UN General Assembly debating Israel, Palestine, Lebanon. We've also had Zelensky in New York, and Zelensky meeting Harris, Zelensky meeting Joe Biden. But we've also had, I didn't actually watch the video of it, I've only seen the pickies, but we've also had Zelensky meeting Trump. And I think this was in Trump Tower, wasn't it? And they come out to, face the press. And Trump talks about his good friend Zelensky and his good friend Putin. Just look at Zelensky's face when he says that. Because, of course, what Zelensky's been doing in America, at least according to the Republicans, and I sort of read it rather like that as well. He's actually acting as the campaign agent for the Democrats in the forthcoming presidential election, in the same way that I would argue that Netanyahu has been acting as the Republican election agent. You know, two fingers up to Biden, the lame duck, but also two fingers up to Harris. Clearly, Netanyahu is banking. He might be wrong, but he's clearly banking on a Trump victory. Equally, though, it seems to me, Zelensky is banking on a Democrat victory, a Harris victory. I'm not sure whether we know, but I think we know. There's enough reports that sort of confirm it, that his much vaunted victory plan isn't anything else than the next tranche of upping the ante in the war. You know, first of all, wasn't it mainline battle tanks, with Britain taking the lead with the Challenger 2, all dozen of them. America then coming in, oh shucks, reluctantly, with specially made, i.e. second grade Abraham tanks. And then we had what NATO wanted, what America wanted, Germany committing itself to the Ukrainian side by giving the go-ahead for Leopard 2 tanks. And we weren't talking about a dozen of them. We were talking about, I don't know, 100, 200 Leopard tanks being supplied by Germany, but also other European powers, because Germany is the main armorer when it comes to European NATO powers. And it's been the same, of course, with F-16s. Britain couldn't take the lead except with, oh, we'll train Ukrainian pilots. But it was other European powers that had to twist the arm of the United States to give the go-ahead for weapons that aren't going to shift the war, but in reality play a symbolic role of locking the European powers, crucially Germany, in to the war in Ukraine. And we have it, I believe, the same. Why they call them long-range missiles, I'm somewhat mystified. These Storm Shadows, Anglo-French missiles, what they called scouts in the French lettering, Storm Shadows when they're British. Either way, they're a joint. And I think Italy's involved in them as well. Either way, Zelensky's been agitating, and so is Lamy, for Ukraine to be allowed to use these missiles on Russian soil. Well, the reality is, of course, that when we come to similar missiles, American missiles have been used in the Kursk oblast with the Ukrainian incursion. They've been used to take out bridges. They've been used to take out pontoons. So in reality, American missiles of a similar sort have already been used, but they want the go-ahead. And at least my version of it is that America wants to be seen to be reluctant. It wants to be seen to being pushed into granting permission. But that seems to be what his victory plan amounts to. Well, again, his generals will tell you, NATO generals will tell you, any intelligent journalist will tell you that while it will make some difference, these are not war winners. They're not going to decide the outcome of the Ukrainian war. In reality, that's decided by your willingness to take losses in terms of men, but also your ability to supply much more humble weapons, such as the artillery shell. That's still the decisive weapon on the battlefield, not Storm Shadows, which are very useful, I'm sure, for taking out command posts or ships. For example, the Black Sea Russian fleet, stuff like that. They ain't they don't have the range to reach, what do they call it now, St. Petersburg or Moscow. The maximum range of these storm shadows is 155 miles. So normally people would talk about that, as far as I understand it. They are tactical missiles. They're not strategic missiles, but they're certainly not, that's my argument, weapons that would guarantee the victory of Ukraine. And of course, what Zelensky fears is precisely a Trump victory. And Trump says that within 24 hours of him winning the election in November, he had already sorted the war out. Well, remember, that's before he takes office. And what Zelensky fears is that he will lay down an ultimatum and say, you've got to trade, you've got to do a deal, to use Trumpian terms. And one presumes that would be concessions when it came to Crimea, concessions when it comes to the Russian majority speaking East. I don't know what else, but it will be that sort of thing. Now, it's quite conceivable that whatever Trump thinks, there will be others, in the Pentagon, in the CIA, that persuade him, look, Mr. President, you're committed to bringing down China, you're committed to defeating the strategic challenge of China. Look, the way we're going about it, Mr. President, is via their soft underbelly, and it's called Russia. That this is the best way to surround and then strangle China, because our real aim in Ukraine isn't to secure every inch of Ukrainian territory. The reality is that our strategic aim is to bring down the Putin FSB regime in Moscow and replace it with a pliant satrap, a Navalny or a Yeltsin would come to mind. And then you can cut the oil off, cut the gas off to China. Instead of China having a friend to the north, an everlasting friendship, it has another enemy. So not only do you have the American fleet in the Pacific, India to its south, but then you'll have a hostile Russia. That seems to me to be the aim, at least of some thinkers, strategic thinkers in the Pentagon. On the other hand, we should also be cautious when it comes to projecting existing alliances. And I was just thinking myself that if we go back to the period in the run-up to World War I, what we saw there is precisely a rapid shifting of strategic alliances. Have I got it written down? I have. Let me get my date. 1894, the Entente between the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland and France. These were the old enemies, going back to way before the Napoleonic and the Revolutionary Wars, going way back into the 18th and 17th century. I was about to say, England always feared, didn't it, that it would be, done in by France, either through Ireland or Scotland, for example. So, you don't have to go back to Henry V. It's something that was ongoing. Anyway, my point would be that in 1894, these previous enemies came to not an alliance, but an understanding. And what is also worthwhile to note is in 1907, France came to a similar understanding with Tsarist Russia, and so did Britain. And this really needs to be understood in the context of what used to be called the Great Game, the contest between the British Empire and the Russian Empire. The British wanted to hold India, the crown jewel of the empire, not only because of the surplus that it extracted from India, but also the use it could make of Indian troops in its African empire. Either way, they came to a deal with Tsarist Russia, the old enemy in the East, and they dumped their old friend in Europe, which of course was Prussia, which had united Germany under Bismarck following the Austrian and then the French war. So we shouldn't simply look at, Russia, even under Putin, automatically remaining on China's side. We could even consider the possibility of Trump making an offer to Putin that he can't refuse, that instead of actually treating Russia, for example, in the way that the United States did treat Russia under Yeltsin, something to be ripped off, something to be humiliated, something to be reduced to a neo-colony, maybe another offer would be made. In other words, we need to actually have an open mind on such questions. What we should understand, though, is the drive of the US hegemon to re-establish its hegemony over the world. And at the moment, there's only one serious full spectrum rival, and that's not Russia, that's not Germany, it's not the EU, it's China. And so alliances we should, consider can shift towards that aim. I'm just saying, it's not that it's going to happen, but if something like that happened, we shouldn't be surprised. That's really the argument that I'm making. After all, if we think back, I think to the 20s, Leon Trotsky, who is no one's fool, he actually predicted World War II, excuse me, I was about to say three, wasn't quite that far-sighted. But he was predicting World War II in the mid-1920s. But what did he say? He said that World War II will be Britain versus the United States. And of course, there was a truth about that. The United States, in the course of World War II, did replace Britain as the global hegemon, except it did it by fighting on the same side as Britain. First of all, with Lend-Lease, and then with troops and aircraft and aircraft carriers and all the rest of it. So, in other words, we shouldn't think that everything is fixed. That we should expect alliances to be made and to be remade in such a period. Okay, let me move on. 53, so I'm going to come to a close. I think very quickly, I was going to talk about Sri Lanka, which I don't know much about. So I'm going to knock that one on the head. I'll simply say that I think the polls in Austria have closed. I don't know what the, what do they call them? The exit polls are. I only know what the voter intention polls were. And for the first time, we had the Austrian Freedom Party, which, remember, was established, I think, in the 50s. I couldn't give you an exact date, but it was established by former SS officers. It's projected to be the largest party in the Austrian lower house. I had it on 27%, followed by the People's Party, which is broadly the equivalent of I'm not going to use the British Conservative Party, but a conservative mainstream bourgeois party on 25%, followed way behind by the party that used to dominate Austria, at least when I was young, the Social Democratic Party on 21%, with the Greens having been halved down to 8%. So the talk is of a potential People's Party, Freedom Party government, with the Freedom Party being the senior partner. Now that would be a break in terms of being the senior partner, not that the Freedom Party hasn't been in government before, but to be the senior partner would be a first. And of course, what you've got on the left, predictably, is talk of, just in the case of the Brotherhood in Italy and Meloni being a fascist, what you've got is talk of the Freedom Party being a Nazi party. Well, of course, we all know that Austria has a Nazi history. Not only did Hitler come from Austria, but I think in terms of popular support, the Nazi Party had more popular support in Austria than it actually did in Germany. Either way, the point that I'm making is that I think this is silly politics. I know I know people who left Britain because of Brexit, because they thought, that bourgeois civilization was just about to come to an end. Maybe it has. We've got Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. But I know people left Britain to escape Brexit to go to Italy. What did they land with? Meloni. I wouldn't be packing my bags if I was an Austrian today. What you've got is a far right party, an anti-migrant party, a party, full of bile, calling for immigration, go back home, that sort of rhetoric, anti-EU rhetoric. Yes, yes, yes. How much they would able to be put that into practice, that's another question. It should also be pointed out, of course, that Austria, to the extent that it's had economic growth over the last, 15, 20 years, it's almost entirely relied on migrants coming in, much as the case with most of the rest of Western Europe and the United States, for that matter. Either way, I just simply say this, that I find the left very strange when they look at Meloni and the Meloni government to say today that what we have in Italy is fascism, that what we have potentially today is an incoming Nazi regime in Vienna. When I look at Sri Lanka, that was going to be I'm not going to examine Sri Lanka, but when we look at the election of a Marxist president, I would say one, I would say, was he ever a Marxist in my terms? No. Was he an official communist? Yes, clearly, of one sort or another. The origins of the JVP are in the Moscow, China. They thought they were all revisionist history. But the point would be that what this guy says is, I'm going to run Sri Lanka after a general election moment. JVP has only got, I think, 4 MPs. But I'm going to run Sri Lanka on the basis of negotiating with the IMF. I'm going to run it, recognizing the role of big business. I'm just going to be not corrupt like the last lot. So I don't see why. The point I'm making is I cannot see why the left cannot recognize ex-communists. Anyone who looks at the old official Communist Party of Italy, I would say, the Euro communists, are they really? Looking at the Democrat Party today in Italy, would you say they're still communists because this is where their origins lie? I think this is absurd. So yes, politics are moving to the right in Europe. There's no doubt about that. That's part of a global trend. I don't have any doubt about that either. There are exceptions, like, for example, in Latin America, the pink tide. There are exceptions, such as Sri Lanka. But in reality, the left itself is being dragged to the right. So look at Lula today in Brazil. What sort of a threat to capitalism does he represent? What sort of threat do we have against capitalism today in Sri Lanka? I'd say none. So anyway, I would urge comrades that want to spread panic to avoid that. The danger with it is that at some point there might be a fascist danger, and you turn around and say, oh, there's a fascist danger. The general working class movement, there's a danger, isn't there, turning around and then saying, yeah, but we thought we already had fascism. We already thought we've got a fascist government. So I'm reminded in that sense of the Turkish left, which some of it says that there's been fascism in Turkey ever since the republic was founded by Ataturk back in 1921. So if you go to Turkey and warn them of the possibility of fascism, they'll just turn around to you and say, well, we've always had fascism. The fascism of Erdogan or the fascism of the People's Republican Party, it's all fascism. I think that's all nonsense. And we need to use these terms. I think if they're going to have any worth, any value of actually analyzing politics and the movement of politics, we need to use these words carefully and not just as an insult word. Anyway, with that, I shall wrap up 1 minute past 6. Thank you, Anne.